the consequences of climate change. And one important consequence of climate change is the action that is taken for it, namely the Green New Deal. The term Green New Deal has a clear reference to the New Deal of the 30s, when the American President Franklin Roosevelt used this term to describe his financial reforms and public work projects to reconstruct society after the Great Depression in America. It was a combination of the stock market crash and the Dust Bowl that created millions of people who were unemployed, homeless and poor, but there he was, Roosevelt, with his New Deal to reinforce society. So where does this term Green New Deal comes from? It first appeared in 2007 when Thomas Friedman was published in the New York Times with his column, and in his column he described for the first time a step to a greener planet, and he even mentioned possible measurements like reducing fossil fuels and scaling up green technology. And the reason for his column was the growing awareness about climate change in America, because America just experienced their hottest year ever on record. So then 1 year later, the United Nations published a report, the Global Green New Deal, and it was commissioned by the United Nations Environment Program, and it was published in response to the global crisis of 2008, financial crisis. And so the report was a combination of policy decisions for economic recovery, poverty eradication, and the reduction of carbon emissions. So then, this year, on the 7th of January, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez published the 14-page non-binding resolution. She is a community worker, an activist, and a politician. She has been part of the House of Representatives since 2019, and she's one of the youngest female congressmen ever. So she published this resolution to recognize the duty of the federal government and to push America to take a major role in mitigating climate change. So, the resolution is the official document that really made the claim of the establishment of the Green New Deal more concrete, but still a non-binding resolution remains one of the lowest levels of legislation. So in the resolution itself, it sets out 5 important goals who are really, really ambitious. The first one is achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. The second goal is to create millions of high-wage jobs. The third goal is to invest in infrastructure and industry. The fourth goal is to secure overall clean water and air over the world. And finally, the resolution demands justice and equity for all Americans. So all in all, giant investments are needed to invest in infrastructure and carbon-free energy. Experts even claim that if we want to realize this resolution, it will cost $10 trillion. So the Green New Deal is called by Alexandria a 10-year mobilization plan, and the Green New Deal is clearly a bilateral concept. Green refers to we want to stop global warming, and New Deal refers to fighting economic inequality. So, supported by many, the resolution lists a number of noble goals to impede climate change, but where it has a purpose, it also lacks a plan for execution, because the 14-page resolution reads more like a criteria for a utopian society instead of a plan to enact change. So, despite the resolution's vagueness, it has started a real revolution. Conversations about climate change in schools, homes, and political offices are more than before the publishment of the resolution. And not only does the Green New Deal reveal the consequences of climate change concerning every aspect of human life, it also furthers the idea that climate change is not an environmental issue, it's an anthropogenic issue. And they really open the resolution with this quote: "Human activity is the dominant cause of severe climate change over the past century." And because of the controversial nature of the climate change, it is a highly discussed and debated topic. And although it is condemned by many influential people like President Trump, the advancing of the Green New Deal is advocated by so many, like politicians, parents, children, and climate change is an initiative that is moving forward. Early this past November, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria announced their plan for new green housing. And so, although it is ambiguous, full of ambitious goals, and is largely still in the ID phase of the plan, the Green New Deal is making waves and changing the conversation about climate change.
Consequences of climate change on human health. Climate change affects human health through different pathways of varying complexity, scale, directness, and different timing. Climate change threatens our health by affecting the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the weathers we experience. Extreme weathers due to climate change range from frequent floods, storms, and heat waves. Frequent heat waves causes illnesses and deaths due to dehydration, heat cramps, strokes, cardiovascular, respiratory, and cerebrovascular diseases. Frequent floods and storms affect agricultural yields and production, resulting in malnutrition, undernutrition due to food or rather crop poisoning. While glaciers are shrinking, ice on rivers and lakes are breaking easier and faster, while plants and animal ranges have shifted, affecting the natural ecosystem. And as humans, we are fully dependent on the natural ecosystem and the services it provides us, such as clean food, clean water, pharmaceutical chemicals, disease regulation, climate regulations, and spiritual fulfillment. The effects of global climate change on human health and well-being are integral parts of the overall climate-related human impacts. And not only are the effects of climate change on human health infectious, but they are also traumatic. Climate change has mental health consequences of climate change range from minimal stress and distress symptoms to clinical disorders, which include anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and suicidality. Other consequences include the effect on the everyday life, perceptions, and experiences of individuals and communities attempting to understand and respond appropriately to climate change and its implications.
Now, transportation has a very important role when it comes to climate change. The various sectors that contribute towards carbon emissions are land use changes, deforestation, as my colleague said, feed, power, agriculture, and transportation, of course. So the transportation sector alone contributes by 19.2% of carbon emissions and has a potential to reduce 4% of it. Now I will continue with private transportation. So there are several car companies that are taking an initiative for this issue to be solved, but can they really solve it? Now Ford. For example, the standalone climate change scenario report complements Ford's annual sustainability report and provides stakeholders with Ford's perspective on the risks and opportunities associated with climate change. It addresses Ford's vision of new mobility opportunities that will contribute to a low-carbon future. Ford engaged an outside consultant with experience in the oil, gas, and automotive industries and an expert in scenario planning in order to create scenarios that were diverse, distinct, and expensive. Today, Ford faces difficulties that influence lives far and wide, from expanding traffic blockage, decaying air quality, and the impacts, of course, of environmental change. So their suggestions are significant, and the cultural expense of not tending to them is very high. As Ford looks to the future, we have the people dream that we will move us from decreasing our effects on the earth or to activities that will make ecological advantages. With the publication of one report, Ford has completed the voluntary climate-related disclosures recommended by the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures. These disclosures are to have the goal to provide information to investors, lenders, insurers, and other stakeholders on Ford's actions to respond to climate change risks. The other company is Tesla. But does it really help to minimize the issue of climate change? So Tesla's innovation is applied in motoring as well as at home with the help of its auxiliary organization, SolarCity. The organization offers sun-oriented board arrangements that can be coordinated into a home structure. Until this point in time, Tesla guarantees that they have separated as much as 4 million tons of carbon dioxide discharges in the United States alone. This depends on the tailpipe outflow decreases from recorded total miles through the worldwide Tesla vehicles. Be that as it may, how huge is the organization with regards to moderating environmental change? In a report referring to the company, Tesla's impact announcement, Elon Musk's vehicle organization said that they are striving to lessen its ozone-harming substance impression, and in the long run will be one of the benchmarks of firms that will live in a zero-output future. And now Grace will talk about the other side of the transportation, which is public transportation.
So, accepting climate change is caused by man causes a lot of lifestyle changes, which have many consequences. The reduction of the emission of greenhouse gases not only has consequences on the private transportation sector, but also great ones on the public transportation sector in the realities of what it will become. Transportation emissions represent almost a quarter of Europe and Canada specifically greenhouse gas emissions, and is the main cause of air pollution within all cities, affecting all of us right here in Brussels. Accepting that public transportation would need to be improved, potentially at a great cost to the taxpayer, or else it would become overcrowded and potentially a safety hazard for everyone involved. Another option is to consider just privatization, but this could come with many adverse effects, such as a lack of transportation in poor neighborhoods where people could not afford to use it, which is where we need it most. As a response to this dilemma of increased public transportation usage, many countries are simply encouraging walking and biking as alternatives, and also placing higher taxes on vehicles that emit more greenhouse gases to encourage the usage of electric vehicles. As a consequence, however, many working class people in European cities are protesting these taxes as classist in nature, especially if this is according to Le Monde newspaper, due to the fact that lower income households are forced to live further outside the city boundaries, where housing costs are lower, and they commute to work still using the cheaper and more affordable option of classic fossil fuel burning automobiles, rather than live in an area of a higher cost of living, which they simply cannot do, and be able to take public transportation. This tax and the realities of class privilege are making lifestyle transitions easier for those of higher income levels, and they further class tension in societies and anger, which can erupt into mass protests, which oftentimes turn violent. I wanted to give an example of media framing in this situation. These protesters are seen as either the hero or the villain, and I wanted to make it very clear that when it comes to the consequences of lifestyle changes, it is the most vulnerable in our societies who will face the most effects. So now here's the against argument.